Just 1 second, you can go ahead and start. We are at record.
Can you hear me?
I took you off of mute. Go ahead.
Thank you. I hope the screen is visible for everyone to see. Thank you for the introduction, Jackie. My name is Julie Langer. I'm General Counsel for the Department of Procurement Services of the city. And today we're going to do an overview of our our incentives and our programs that we have available through procurements advertised by DPS. So I'm going to start with talking about our programs. We have a number of programs. I'm going to go through each of these and then we'll move on to our bid incentives that we have. So first, going to start off talking about some of our construction programs. The first one that we're going to go over is our Small Business Initiative for Construction program. This is a program that's designed to provide opportunities for small businesses to participate in city-funded construction contracts. The value of contracts that apply to the Small Business Initiative program are $3 million or less. There's two tiers. The tier 1, SBI 1, is for projects with an estimated cost between 2 and 3 million. SBI 2 is for projects with an estimated cost of less than 2 million. In order to bid on a project that is designated as an SBI 1 or SBI 2 project, you have to be a small local business enterprise. So for each SBI 1 and SBI 2, there are certain size criteria that you need to meet in order to bid. For SBI 1, your business can be no larger than the SBA size standards and personal net worth limits that you would need to meet if you were applying to be certified by the city in our MBE or WBE program. For the SBI 2 program, you can be no more than half of those size standards. You also have to be a local business, and by local business, we mean that your principal place of business, so where you operate out of, and the majority of your full-time regular workforce all must be located in the 6-county region. So the 6-county region is the Cook County and the surrounding counties around it. And that term is defined in our regulations for the program, which you can find on our website. And it's also the same definition for what you would need to be certified as an MBE or WB with the city. So one thing to keep in mind with the SBI programs is small businesses must perform the majority of the work with its own workforce or with other subcontractors who are small businesses. So if you are interested in bidding on a Small Business Initiative SBI project, you can see the project will be designated clearly in the bid package as SBI. And then you yourself as the prime contractor must be an SBI or an SBE firm. So you're a small business enterprise yourself. And the majority of the work has to be performed by your firm and other small business enterprises as well as subcontractors. So you can either perform the majority on your own or you can use other small business subcontractors, but the majority has to be performed by small firms. So the next program I'm going to talk about is our MBI program for construction or mid-sized business initiative. So this is designed to increase the participation of small and mid-sized businesses for city-funded construction contracts. So these are great opportunities for firms that are slightly bigger than our certification size standard. Let's say you graduated from that program, but that you're still growing and developing and looking for opportunities to build your capacity. These projects are estimated value between 3 and 20 million. And like the SBI program, there's two tiers. So for MBI 1, we're looking at projects with an estimated cost between 10 and 20 million. In order to bid on these projects, you have to be a mid-sized business enterprise. So to count for that, you have to meet certain size standards. You can be no more than 2 times the size standard you would need to apply for certification. And by that, we mean you have to have your personal net worth your personal net worth can be no more than 2 times the limit set forth in our certification regulations, and your business can be no more than 2 times the size standard for the area that you're operating under. For MBI 2, this is for projects between 3 and 10 million, and you can be no more than 1.5 times those size standards. If you are a certified firm, meaning you're an MBE or WBE, you are presumed to meet these size standards because you have to be under these size standards to be certified. If you are not a certified firm, you'll have to provide documentation to the city demonstrating that you meet these size standards. That's the case with the SBI program as well. For this program, you also have to be a local business. So just like with SBI, you have to have your principal place of business and the majority of your full-time regular workforce in the 6-county region. And 51% of the work has to be performed by your firm as an MBE, mid-sized business enterprise, or other subcontractors that are mid-sized local businesses. A relatively new program that we have is a non-construction mid-sized business initiative program. So the first two were for construction contracts. This is for non-construction contracts. These would be things like professional services agreements, architectural engineering agreements, and the like. So these are projects that can be between 3 and 10 million in total cost, and they're exclusive to small and mid-sized local businesses. So the business principal place of business and majority of full-time workforce have to be in the 6-county region, and the bidder size standard can be no more than 1.5 times the size standard you would need to be certified as a MBE or WBE. So in order to participate in these programs or in contracts identified as part of the non-construction MBI program, at least 51% of the work has to be performed by mid-sized local business enterprises, either at the prime level or prime and subcontractor level. Okay, next I'm going to talk about the Diversity Credit Program. This is a program that is designed to increase the participation of MBEs and WBEs in private contracts. So the whole purpose behind this program is when you're working on city work, there are typically minority and women-owned enterprise goals on the project. But we want our prime contractors to use our minority and women-owned business community on other work beyond just city work. We want them to look to MBEs and WBEs for private sector work. In order to incentivize that, this program allows prime contractors to earn credit by utilizing MBEs and WBEs on those private sector contracts. Prime contractors can earn $1 of credit for every $3 earned by the MBE WBE vendor on that private sector contract, for a maximum credit of 5%. So if a prime contractor applies to earn diversity credit program, they will have to come to the city and say, I worked on this private sector contract. There was no other affirmative action goals on the project. And this is the amount that the MBE WBE earned on the program, and this is the amount I'm seeking as a credit. After we go through that and we determine, yes, you are eligible and you have earned this credit, we will grant you a certificate or credit certificate that then you can apply to a future city contract. How it works is that when you bid on a contract, you would be able to designate that you are applying the diversity credit that you had earned towards that contract's MBE WBE goals. So let's say, for example, on a private sector contract, you had used MBEs in a manner that allowed you to earn a 5% diversity credit to apply to a city contract, and the city contract has a 25% MBE goal. You could potentially apply the 5% credit towards that 25% MBE goal. So then you would need to demonstrate good faith efforts to utilize MBEs for the remaining 20% or more of the contract. If you earn a credit, it can only be used once, though you can apply it to multiple contracts. It's just you can only use it one time. And the credits expire after 1 year. Okay. Mentor Protege Program. So this is a program that encourages established firms to team up and provide mentoring to MBE and WBE firms. So in order to participate, a prime contractor or a subcontractor must enter into a written mentor-protege agreement with an MBE or WBE for approval by the CPO. The way the program works is that you can earn a 0.5% participation credit for every 1% performed by the protege, up to 5% on a city contract. The agreement itself must be designed to assist the protege in becoming self-sustaining, competitive, and profitable. We have in our rules for the program, which are available on our website, a sample agreement that gives some insight on what we look for in a mentor-protege agreement. So we typically want to see, is there financial assistance? Is there technical assistance? Is there, I'm trying to think about the various types of assistance that need to be provided to the prime to help them become self-sustaining and competitive and profitable. We want to know, how often are you going to meet together? Who's going to meet? What are the goals of the program, so that at the end of the mentor-protege agreement, we can see that real benefit has been provided to the protege. In addition to the credit that you can earn through participation in the program, you can also earn a 1% bid incentive. How you apply is that when bidding on a project, you would identify in the special conditions that you are participating in the mentor-protege agreement, and you would submit with your compliance plan a written mentor-protege agreement for review and approval by the CPO. When we review your compliance plan, we'll also review the mentor-protege agreement, and if approved, you will be eligible for the 1% incentive, and you will also be eligible to earn the participation credit throughout the course of that contract. The target market program. So this is a program that is designed to provide opportunities for minority and women-owned businesses to be the exclusive bidders on city non-construction programs, or contracts. So this is exclusively for MBEs, WBEs, or joint ventures that are consisting exclusively of MBEs or WBEs. The firms must be certified by the city as an MBE or WBE prior to bidding. And I should point out that we say it must be certified by the city, but the city and Cook County have a reciprocity program, meaning that if you're certified by Cook County or the city of Chicago, we will count your certification as an MBE or WBE. When you are participating on a target market contract, the prime contractor may subcontract up to 50% of the dollar value of the contract to non-MBE WBEs, but majority of the work needs to be performed by certified firms. Okay, phased graduation program. So this program is designed to maximize diversity in the city's contracting by making businesses who have graduated from our program eligible to continue participation in our construction and non-construction program for 3 additional years. So essentially, if a firm has grown too large, usually based off of your gross receipts and your size, or the owner's personal net worth has exceeded the personal net worth limits for certification, rather than just saying you're no longer in the program, good luck, we phase you out in a 3-year period where in the first year, the firm is eligible to earn 75% participation credit. The second year, 50% participation credit, and then the third year, 25% participation credit. And we have an example on the slide here. So if you're in the first year of the program, for each dollar paid to a firm, the prime contractor will be credited 75 cents. In the second year, for every dollar, it'd be 50 cents, and then for every dollar in the third year, it'd be 25 cents. At any time, if a firm that is part of the phased graduation program drops below the size standards for gross receipts or personal net worth limits, they can then reapply to be part of the MBE-WBE program. Okay, so those are our bid incentives, and I realize we're saving questions at the end and that I'm going through these very quickly, but I want to make sure that we have time to touch on these so that I have plenty of time to answer any questions you might have about those programs or these incentives. So for bid incentives, before I launch into a description of these incentives, just wanted to explain what a bid incentive is. A bid incentive is something that's designed to either encourage a prime contractor or subcontractor to take some action or to refrain from taking some action in exchange for an artificial price reduction on their bid. So if we reduce your bid by any amount that you've earned through a bid incentive, it is purely for evaluation purposes. So let's say you're eligible for a 1% incentive. We will take what you've bid on a project, reduce your bid by 1%, and then we will compare that to other bids. If you win the contract, the amount of your contract will be the amount of your actual bid, not the amount less the percentage that you've earned through the bid incentive. So with that, I'm going to talk about these incentives. We've grouped them on the slide here because there are certain bid incentives that are applicable only to construction projects. There's one that is applicable only to non-construction, and then there are some that are applicable to both construction and non-construction. If you're bidding on city work, the bid package will tell you what bid incentives apply. There will be a section in the bid package that explains the incentive, and there will also be affidavits that you'll be required to complete and submit with your bid if you're interested. Okay, so diving into these, starting with the apprentice utilization bid incentive. So this first incentive is an incentive to encourage prime contractors to utilize apprentices on construction projects with an estimated value of $100,000 or more. And by apprentice, we mean apprentices who are sponsored into an apprenticeship training program by a contractor that's authorized by a union to sponsor apprentices. And the apprentice is enrolled in or has graduated from a construction technology training program administered by City Colleges of Chicago or a CPS graduate. The way this incentive works is that it is an earned credit incentive. So it's slightly different than the majority of our other incentives. With this one, you apply at the beginning of the contract to earn the incentive at the end of the contract. So when you're bidding, you will make a commitment to utilize apprentices for a certain percentage of their work. And at the end of the contract, we'll determine whether or not you've met that commitment. And if you have, we will award an incentive that you can apply to a future bid. So it's a tiered incentive. If you commit to 5 to 10% of the work to be performed by apprentices, and you meet that commitment at the end of the contract, you can earn a 0.5% bid incentive. If you make a commitment of 11 to 15%, and then at the end of the contract you've met that requirement, you can earn a 1% bid incentive. If you earn the credit, it's valid for 3 years, meaning you can submit bids with the bid incentive applied during that 3-year period, but you can only win one contract using the bid incentive. Okay, next is our Equal Employment Opportunity or EEO incentive. If you've been on city construction contracts, you might be familiar with the term award criteria figure. Essentially, we are trying to incentivize prime contractors to utilize minorities and women or journey workers, apprentices, and laborers on construction projects that are city funded. So using a Canvas formula, bidders propose minority and women utilization levels as a percentage of the work hours on the project for each of those categories for journey workers, apprentices, and laborers. The commitment cap for female workers is 15%, and the commitment cap for minority workers is 70%. Those caps don't mean that you can't utilize minority and women workers for greater percentages of the work, but for the purposes of calculating this incentive, those are the caps that we put into place. If you are using a minority or woman worker who resides in a socioeconomically disadvantaged area, we apply 150% credit for every work hour, so you can have additional credit applied towards this incentive. So after completing a number of calculations that are set forth in the canvassing formula, you'll end up with what's called the award criteria figure. And the award criteria figure is the figure that we evaluate bids by. We also, if you apply for other incentives, will take those incentives off of this figure. So let's say you have an award criteria figure plus you've earned another of incentives. we'll subtract those off and then compare your bid against the final number against other bids. Okay, so this is another incentive, apprentice bid incentive. Similar to the one we covered just a few slides ago, this is an earned credit incentive, meaning that you are making a commitment on the front end of the contract and then you earn the incentive at the end of the contract. So this is designed to incentivize prime contractors to sponsor and utilize ex-offender apprentices in construction contracts. Some key points for this one. We work with the Department of Family and Support Services and delegate agencies to recruit, screen, and refer potential qualified candidates for this apprentice incentive. All candidates go through an initial intake process where their eligibility is determined. So like the other apprentice incentive, this is a credit that you can earn that will be valid for 3 years, but it can only be used to win one contract. And if 5 to 10% of the labor hours are performed by ex-offender apprentices, you can earn a 0.5% bid incentive. 11 to 15%, you can earn a 1% bid incentive. Okay, the next one is the project area subcontractor bid incentive. On every city-funded construction contract, we have identified what is called a project area. And if you agree to utilize prime contractors that are located in that project area, you could be potentially eligible for a bid incentive ranging from 0.5% to 2%. Subcontractor, however, has to be a small business based on SBA size standards, and the subcontractor must perform meaningful day-to-day business at a facility in that area and in the project area, and must be that business location has to be the place of employment for the majority of its regular full-time workforce. The reason we have those types of requirements is because we want to make sure that someone's not just setting up an office for the purposes of getting the incentive. We want to make sure this incentive is actually benefiting subcontractors and businesses that are located in these areas and actually have their regular business location there and their regular operations are operating out of that location. So it's a tiered incentive. So 1 to 16% of the work, if it's performed by a project area subcontractor, you can earn a 0.5% incentive. Up to 50% or more can result in a 2% incentive. One thing that we have noted on here is that the Municipal Code of Chicago requires that at least 7.5% of the total labor hours be performed by project area residents and 50% of the project area, or excuse me, the labor hours performed by city residents. So the project area we use to calculate this 7.5% requirement is the same project area that we're looking at when determining whether or not you're eligible for the project area subcontractor bid incentive if you apply for it. Okay, next is our veteran-owned subcontractor utilization bid incentive. So this is another construction incentive, and it's designed to encourage the utilization of VBEs as subcontractors on the project. In order to be eligible for the incentive, you must use a subcontractor that is certified by the City of Chicago as a veteran-owned small local business enterprise, or VBE. It's a tiered incentive ranging from 0.5% to 2%. When you apply, you'll need to show us that the firm is certified by the city as a VBE. Okay, so next is the city-based manufacturers bid incentive, and now we're moving into an incentive that applies to non-construction. So this is designed to increase contracting and supply opportunities and participation by city-based manufacturers. In order to be eligible, the manufacturer needs to be licensed, taxed, and operating in the City of Chicago. And this is going to apply for contracts for goods or supplies or commodities with an estimated value of $100,000 or more, and it's city funded. And it's a tiered incentive. So if the goods provided are equal 25 to 49% of the contract value, 1% bid incentive is potentially something that you can apply for. If the goods provided equal 75% or more, you can earn a 2% bid incentive. And I would encourage you to take a look at our rules if you're interested in applying for this incentive for more information about the eligibility requirements. Next is the alternately powered vehicles bid incentive. So this incentive, we're trying to encourage contractors to utilize alternately powered vehicles in their fleet. In order to be eligible, the business must be located in the 6-county region, and a majority of the fleet has to be located and used in the 6-county region, and the majority of those vehicles have to be alternately powered. Alternately powered vehicles mean vehicles that are fueled by alternate fuels such as natural gas, liquefied petroleum gas, hydrogen, ethanol, E85, and electric vehicles. And if you are eligible for this incentive, you can earn 0.5% bid incentive. Okay, and before I dive into the rest of these incentives, which can apply to both construction and non-construction contracts, I just wanted to point out with all of these incentives, you are typically required to provide evidence to the city that you are eligible for the incentive, either with your bid. After we received your bid, we could ask for additional information, or at any time during the course of the contract. If at the end of the contract, we've determined that you were not eligible or are no longer eligible for the incentive you applied for, there are potential damages that could be assessed, typically in the amount of 3 times the bid incentive that you earned. So it's important that if you are applying for these incentives, you are actually eligible and can provide documentation to demonstrate that you are eligible for these incentives. Okay, with that, getting back in, we're now shifting into incentives that can apply to both construction and non-construction contracts. Starting with our BEPD incentive, or business enterprises owned or operated by people with disabilities. So this incentive is designed to encourage participation by BEPDs on city contracts. The BEPD, or the firm that you're seeking to use, either at the prime or subcontractor level, must be certified by the city as a BEPD. Generally, in order to be certified as a BEPD, the business enterprise must be 51% or more owned by people with disabilities. And this can be earned through the prime or subcontractor level. So the prime contractor can be a BEPD, or the subcontractor, or both. Like many of our incentives, it's a tiered incentive ranging from 1% to 4%. Okay, city-based business incentive. So this is designed to increase opportunities and participation by city-based businesses. So this applies to any city-funded contract valued at $100,000 or more, and there are 3 levels of incentives here. The 4% incentive will apply if your business is city-based. The way we determine if you're a city-based business means that you are conducting meaningful day-to-day business from a facility in the city. The majority of your regular full-time workforce is actually working out of that city facility. You hold all city licenses, and you're subject to applicable city taxes. Essentially, what we're trying to get at is that this is where your business operates out of. It's not just a satellite office you're setting up for the purpose of getting an incentive. It's not just a storefront. It is where you actually conduct your business. That is what we want to see. If that applies to you and you're located in the city, you are potentially eligible for a 4% bid incentive. Now, if in addition to being a city-based business, the majority of your regular full-time workforce are also city residents, you can be eligible for a 6% bid incentive. If in addition to that, the majority of those city resident employees live in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas, you are potentially eligible for an 8% incentive. So these incentives they don't add up together. It is either the 4, the 6, or the 8% that you can apply for. Typically, when you submit your bid, you're required to provide proof that you're a city-based business. We'll often, if you're applying for the 6% or 8% incentive, we will require evidence that the majority of your employees are city residents by asking for documentation showing us where your employees reside and whether or not they reside in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas. So I mentioned socioeconomically disadvantaged areas for a few incentives. And when I'm speaking to that term, I'm referring to the areas that are highlighted on this map, which is prepared by the Department of Planning and Development. So if you are looking to hire individuals for the purposes of these incentives that are residing in socioeconomically disadvantaged areas, you would be looking to hire people who reside in the highlighted areas. Okay, bid incentive to encourage MBE-WB participation. I mentioned earlier in this presentation that the majority of city-funded contracts have MBE-WBE participation goals. There are some instances, however, where we can't set MBE-WBE goals because there's not enough certified firms available, or there's just not enough types of subcontracting opportunities to have opportunities available for MBE-WBE firms. In those types of situations, we would have 0 goals on a contract. However, we still want to encourage prime contractors to utilize MBE-WBE firms where they can. So if a firm wants to make a commitment to utilize MBE-WBE firms, even though there are no goals on the contract, they can potentially earn a bid incentive. It's a tiered incentive, like many of our incentives, ranging from 0.75% to 2%. And this incentive can be earned through MBE-WBE participation at the prime level or at the subcontractor level, and can be direct or indirect. Okay, next is our veteran-owned small business joint venture bid incentive. This is a very long-named incentive because there's 2 parts. You can be eligible for this incentive either by participating as a veteran-owned business enterprise on the prime level on its own. There's no need to joint venture with another business. Or you can form a joint venture between a small business enterprise and a veteran-owned business. So I'm going to break down each of those. So if you're applying as a VBE, you have to be certified by the city, and the business has to have 51% or more veteran ownership. That's a criteria in order to be a veteran-owned business enterprise. At the joint venture level, all members have to be a small business, a veteran-owned business, or both. At least one member, however, has to be a veteran-owned business. The SBEs must collectively have at least 30% interest in the joint venture. And all veteran-owned businesses have to have at least a 30% interest in the joint venture. The joint venture, its partners have to self-perform at least 20% of the work, and none of the joint venture members may act as brokers. So essentially what we're trying to do is provide opportunities for small local businesses and veteran-owned businesses. This applies to contracts with city-funded contracts that are with an estimated value of $100,000 or more. And if you are eligible for this, you can earn a 5% bid incentive. Oh, excuse me. Okay, so this is our newest incentive that we have, the Diverse Workforce and Management Bid Incentives. There's actually 2 incentives here, and they're designed to encourage contractors to employ a diverse workforce and management. And it applies to contracts with an estimated value of $100,000 or more. So this is city-funded contracts. So in order to be eligible, the bidder has to have a diverse workforce and/or a diverse management. You can apply for either one. And both of them are tiered. For the diverse workforce incentive, if 10% to 20% of your workforce is diverse, you are eligible for a 2% incentive. If between 20 and 40% of your workforce is diverse, you can be eligible for a 4%. And if over 40% of your workforce is diverse, you can be eligible for a 6% bid incentive. You can also apply for the diverse management incentive. With the diverse management incentive, if 10 to 20% of your management is diverse, you can earn a 0.5% incentive. Up to, if you have over 40% of your workforce, or excuse me, of your management that's diverse, you can earn a 4% bid incentive. So these incentives, you can either apply to one or the other or both. And so they can be combined together for a maximum of a 10% incentive on your bid. Okay, so I already touched on some of this, but just to reiterate how these incentives work, applicable incentives are listed in the bid package. So you will know when you are reviewing the bid package what incentives you could potentially apply for. It will also tell you in the bid package whether or not you can combine certain incentives. I'll get into this in a moment about some that you can't combine. Bidders are going to be required to submit an affidavit and all requested documentation in order to be considered. So the bid package will tell you what it is that you need to submit with your bid if you're interested in applying for these incentives. If you don't provide the affidavit and you don't provide required information, you're not going to be able to earn the incentive. So if you are eligible, your bid will be reduced by the amount of the incentives that you are eligible for evaluation purposes only. And I mentioned that some incentives can't combine. And the bid package will tell you also which ones can't combine. So just to go over some of these. So the city-based business incentives at the 4, 6, and 8% tiers cannot be combined with the city-based manufacturer incentive. Also, if you're eligible for the 4% city-based incentive, you can also apply for the 6 or 8. It's either the 4 or the 6 or the 8%. With respect to the city-based manufacturer utilization incentive, I already mentioned that you can't combine it with a city-based business incentive, but you also can't combine it with the project area subcontractor utilization incentive or the veteran-owned subcontractor or VBE utilization incentive. The two different veteran-owned incentives, so the VBE subcontractor and the SBE veteran joint venture or VBE incentive, those two can't be combined together. It's either one or the other. So this chart gives you the overview of all of the ones that can't be combined. And we also have information on our website that explains which ones can and can't be combined as well. Some requirements after award. So if you are awarded a contract, you will likely be, it says you may be, but you likely be required to submit documentation at contract closeout or throughout the performance demonstrating that you're meeting your commitments, because failure to meet your commitments may result in a fine of up to 3 times the amount of the incentive granted. Or if you're earning an earned credit incentive, we'll deny you your credit. There's also a potential that we could make a finding of non-responsibility. Okay, with that, I will open it up to questions. And before we dive into those, I'm just going to say that.
Just leave it on. I was going to say.
Oh, I'm sorry. I stopped sharing. I was just going to mention that I can answer general questions about the incentives, but if you are interested in bidding on a particular contract and you have specific questions about your applicability or your eligibility for that contract, I can't answer anything about open procurements, but happy to answer general questions about how the incentives work.
All right. They did have one question here. And I'm not quite sure, Julie, if I've sent out the question to see if the question contained, could give me more information. But the question basically asked about the commodity codes. One of the challenges is to find the correct commodity code to enter. On site screens offer everything to fight COVID 19, from employee scans, employee testing, safety consultations, workspaces and building uh, contamination, contact tracing, and face masks. I don't hand sanitizer and disinfectant wipes. I don't know if they're asking if they need to have the commodity code for all of those things.
I'm not sure I understand the question.
I put out more, trying to get more information. Um, you know, I might have to just take the mic off and let her ask her own question because it didn't have specifically a question. So that's the reason that let's go on to the second part. For a foreign limited ability company headquartered in Florida, should we apply for MBE/WBE certification in Illinois, or will the state of Florida certification suffice?
So, one of the requirements to be certified as an MBE or WBE firm with the city is that you be a local business. And by local, you have to reside in the 6 county region, which is defined in our regulations. But it's essentially you would need to be in the state of Illinois. So, we wouldn't certify a business as operating in Florida. So, you wouldn't be eligible for certification.
And I guess at this point, did you get any directly to you, Julie? Because those were the only two questions we received. So I will ask at this time, are there any additional questions that anyone wants us to answer? And while we give them just a few seconds to ask those questions, type in their question. I will say thank you if you do not have any further questions. Thank you so much for attending this workshop. I want to say thank you to Julie Langer for spending her time to go over this information with us. And if you have no further questions, I will say have a great afternoon, the rest of your afternoon. And we look forward to seeing you on one of these workshops again in the future. Stay safe, wash your hands, wear your mask, and stay well. Take care. And Julie, I have no further questions that were submitted. So take care, and we will talk to everybody soon.
Thanks.
All righty.